I completed a world conquest December 5th, 1889. So, how do we minimize the time to complete a world conquest? The main bottleneck is that you can only declare a war while not already in a diplomatic play escalating, and a diplomatic play takes 100 days to escalate. There is a way to lose leadership of a diplomatic play, which lets you declare another one, but it requires becoming a subject and only works for 10 years. We will be doing this, but it is not enough to solve the fundamental problem of waiting for the 100-day cooldown. So we are also trying to minimize the number of wars we need to declare with things such as forming the North German Confederation. Now the next question is, why did we pick Russia? The simple answer is Russia has the most states with 73 compared to the second place is USA with 39 states. Additionally, it has great borders with many countries, so you don't have to deal with many convoy issues that you would on countries, for example, with the UK, which has to ship all their stuff, which makes them an impractical option. And as well as that, we're going to need high relations with Prussia later on in the run, and France really struggles with this. Now the question is, why do we need high relations with Prussia? And the answer to that is we want to try to become a Prussian protectorate. So why do we want to become a Prussian protectorate? Well, countries who are your overlord, when they join your wars, they take them over, which resets your war declaration cooldown. This is essential to the run. Now, the reason for specifically Prussia is countries who are your subject or overlord do not take the relations hit from infamy, so we can still be able to call them into a war with Austria to give them German leadership for the North German Confederation, because all the other great powers will be super mad at. If we were to say become a subject of Austria, we would have a very hard time trying to get the NGF to form. We start out by trying to trigger corn laws and doing some basic economy, then we research empiricism. This is because it gives extra maneuvers. Then we rival everyone that we can for as much influence as possible, which we will then use later to tank our prestige. Now we declare war on Great Britain for liberate Malta. This is because we want them to add humiliate against us, which we will be using to tank our prestige even further. Now that we are 1 year into the game, we are allowed to cancel our rivalries, so to lower our prestige, we get humiliated by the UK, then we ally Prussia. The reason we need to ally Prussia is if you are allies with your overlord, it makes it way easier to call them into your wars, because normally you have to either give them an obligation or a state to get them to join you. Then we use up all of our influence and cancel our rivalries to hit negative 100% influence for minus prestige. Now with all these sources of prestige, we barely have a low enough prestige to become a minor power. You can see we have negative 85%, minus 20% from being humiliated, minus 20% from very low government wages, and negative 50% from our influence deficit. You can see here that the current requirement to become a major power is 72, so we're 5 prestige away from failing, but we will barely make it. Now that we're getting close to jumping to minor power, we declare war on Denmark to liberate Schleswig and Holstein, and then we sway Prussia in to become their protectorate. The Kazakh revolt ends up triggering the second we click this button here because we're on minor power, so we fail instantly because one of the conditions is rank of Russia is less than great power. Now I'm just going to quickly demonstrate how overpowered the ability to call your overlord into wars is. So we declare war here on Bukhara, then we add all the war goals we want, then we can sway Prussia in for call ally, and then immediately we get them swayed in and we can declare another war against, for example, Kunduz, force diplomatic play, call Prussia in, add more war goals, and you'll see we can immediately just keep on declaring wars like this until eventually your overlord has too much neutrality bonus from being in wars and you have to stop. There is one small problem though. Normally you're not allowed to have an alliance with your overlord, so the second that you hit this cannot break this pact timer on 3rd of January 1847 or 10 years after you form your alliance, you lose the ability to call your overlord into wars easily. We owed Prussia an obligation to get the alliance, and that's because otherwise the pact timer would only be 1 year, which is of course the time it takes for us to become subject. If we owe them an obligation, then it becomes 10 years, that's the minimum time, so you get a lot more extra time to do this. Now in the run, I declare a ton of wars in Central Asia and Afghanistan, specifically avoiding Kokand and Khiva though, because killing the Governor General of the Steppe will give us a claim on them, which invalidates your conquer war goal, which is very annoying. In the early game, we declare wars on France, the Ottomans, and USA to get truces with them to avoid getting cut down to size. They luckily end up adding no primary war goals, so we just back down to all their wars. France sides against us against Oyo, so we liberate Occitania and conquer Normandy from them. Now in August of 1841, we declare war on Austria to liberate Hungary. We're going to be calling Prussia into this war for German leadership, which will let them form the North German Confederation, which annexes about 20 countries. Now, we defeated Austria, so the North German Confederation formed, and for some reason it annexed our subject of the Baltics. I assume this has to do with us being a Prussian protectorate. Of course, in between all these major events I've been talking about, we've been declaring a war every 100 days or more often by calling in Prussia, so we're currently at war with a ton of countries that we haven't finished wars in. In 1847, our alliance with Prussia expires, so once we get done with those wars, we declare independence from Prussia in late 1848, with the goal of conquering some states from them and getting independence to become a great power, which will give us more maneuvers that we can use on future wars. For some reason, after we got independence from Prussia, our economy completely collapsed and we started running like a negative 300,000 balance, even though we were running a positive balance with full gold reserves before this. I'm not really sure exactly what changed. I mean, ammunition prices probably skyrocketed without Prussian ammo factories, but I didn't expect it to be quite that severe. Now, by 1855, we were in so many wars that we had to lower our GUI scale in order to be able to see our ledger instead of just seeing pure wars, which was kind of annoying. Due to my focus on fighting European wars against France, NGF, and the like, I end up losing this war against Gobir and end up having to liberate Dahomey, and also end up losing this war against New Granada and end up having to liberate Honduras. That was kind of unfortunate. Now in 1855, we declare our first war against the UK to conquer South Atlantic Islands. The reason we're declaring for South Atlantic Islands is very few people have an interest in that region, so we don't have to worry about the North German Confederation joining, as they would be likely to join if we declared in the England HQ. Then we conquered various states in England afterwards as war goals. Don't know why, but for some reason the UK has their homeland just wide open, and we just end up landing into the home counties. Very nice. Now after the truce is up, we declare on Britain again, this time for transfer the British Raj. This was technically not necessary because we could have gotten the British Raj by full annexing the UK. However, I was scared that having that long of a truce with the British Raj that late into the game would cause us problems with annexing Indian subjects in time, so I decided to get the EIC a little bit earlier that way. Oh yeah, in case you weren't aware, if you full annex the country by them hitting negative 100 war score, rather than them accepting the peace deal, you get all of their subjects for free. A sort of funny thing happened after we concluded that war, which is that Great Britain's prestige is now negative because of the negative 100 from unfulfilled treaty obligations, which they get from Brazil not having banned slavery, along with the lack of other modifiers from us taking a ton of their states, makes their prestige actually go negative. In the meantime, while we've been fighting the UK, we've also been fighting other wars, such as against the Southeast Asians. We almost lost against Siam, but we barely managed to come back. We had to load back several times in order to succeed in that war. One of the advantages of staying in a ton of wars is it makes your enemies extremely confident that they will be able to defeat you, so they are very unlikely to back down, because you get 1 or 2 confidence per level, or per war you're in. This USA war was one of the last hard wars we fought, because their only war goal was on Georgia, and we weren't really defending that, because we were busy in a ton of different European wars at the time, such as against Spain, which we were still in at the time because stupid, we had a war goal against Cuba, and so we had to land Cuba in order to enforce that. For the EIC, we wanted to annex them, but we didn't want to get truces with their subjects, so we granted them a ton of states and added as many conscripts as we could to increase our chances that they would simply accept. Then we just reloaded over and over again until they finally accepted annexation. Now that we have annexed the EIC, the plan is to attack countries that have lots of countries supporting their independence, and then conquer all those countries so that we can annex many countries in a single war. These wars against Tibet and Shan were the last wars that we ended up being super close to losing. We also got kind of close in these wars against France, but we always knew that we were going to come here, because as you can see, once our troops arrived to the front, we have a huge advantage now, but it took us a long time for our troops to arrive, because I believe they were doing other things. I can't exactly remember what, probably crushing the USA or something. So we're now getting into what I thought was going to be the last hard part of the run, which is annexing the USA and Finland before 1885 so that we could get out of these wars and then reduce autonomy on our remaining subjects. Because if we reduce autonomy after 1885, the truce will be after 1890, and thus we will be failing the challenge. Now I try to grant states to my various protectorates, such as the Ionian Islands and United Tribes. However, Tahiti I couldn't grant states to because they do not have any adjacent state which is close enough. And also, I'd accidentally grant states to the Russian East Indies, thinking they were a dominion when they actually were not. And of course, the reason we are granting states to our subjects is so that we can reduce autonomy on them. My goal for the run was 1880s, and I almost barely didn't achieve this because I initially thought that Qing was going to join this war, and that was going to be a maneuver issue. But I ended up realizing that that wouldn't even be a maneuver issue if they did join. So for my initial thing here, I declared war on Qing. And that was a huge mistake because what ended up happening is Tahiti stopped supporting the independence of the Russian East Indies, which meant we couldn't get into a war to annex Tahiti since they were a protectorate, so, and their truce with us ended near the very end of the game, so there was no way we could like decrease autonomy or something in time. We wanted to decrease autonomy way earlier, but they were not close enough to another state of ours to be decreased autonomy on. So we declare war on the Russian East Indies and add conquer war goals against all their supporters of independence. Then after this, we will be declaring war on Qing. And then after that, it's just going to be waiting for the truce with our final subject to declare war on, which is the Ionian Islands. And there's the deck on Qing. Also, I forgot we are also decking on Western Australia, but they're not really a relevant country. They're just in some random island off in the Pacific Ocean. Now, the final declaration is against the Ionian Islands. It took me a bunch of resets, but eventually they accept annexation, and we get our finishing time of December 5th. Of course, if we used Turtle Island, we could have gotten a much faster time, but that was a little bit too exploity. Maybe I'll do a Turtle Island world conquest in the future. So yeah, that's the run. You can go look at some final things, like this is the technology we ended the game with. Yeah, it's not exactly the greatest of technologies for 1889. In fact, it's terrible text for 1889. This is how many people are in the different acceptance tiers. You can see the vast majority are in violent hostility. This is what my GDP graph looks like. I'm not exactly sure why it fell off at the end. I assume it's because of army demobilization or something. To be specific, the state with the most GDP is West Bengal, a bunch of Indian states, and then the highest non-Indian state is Kharkov. And these are the laws that we ended the game with. As you can see, not particularly great laws. The full run will be in the description. When the screen is fully black, that means my game has just crashed. So yeah, that's the end of the video. Goodbye.